Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen felt every one of his 34 years as he trudged toward the mess hall at Fort Bragg. His boots were caked with mud from the North Carolina red clay that seemed to get into everything. His uniform was soaked through with sweat despite the cooling October evening. 18 straight hours of Hell Week training exercises had pushed his platoon to their absolute limits, and Chen had been right there with them, refusing to ask his soldiers to do anything he wouldn't do himself. His stomach growled viciously. He'd skipped lunch to help Private Morrison with his rappelling technique, and breakfast felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. The mess hall was closing in exactly 7 minutes. He timed his sprint from the barracks perfectly, or so he thought. The doors swung open, and Chen was immediately hit by the beautiful aroma of whatever the cooks had prepared. He didn't even care what it was at this point. He'd eat mystery meatloaf with enthusiasm, but his heart sank as he saw the line. At least 30 soldiers stood between him and food, and the kitchen staff was already starting to put things away. "No way," Chen muttered to himself. "Not happening." He'd earned this meal. He'd spent the day keeping his troops safe through live fire exercises, equipment malfunctions, and one near miss when Specialist Rodriguez almost walked into a clearly marked danger zone. Chen had written up 2 safety violations, counseled 3 soldiers, and prevented what could have been a serious training accident. He was exhausted, starving, and running on fumes. Chen pushed forward into the crowded mess hall with determination. Soldiers milled about everywhere, some in line, others carrying trays to tables, a few just standing around talking. The usual dinner rush chaos. He weaved between groups, his focus locked on that serving line like a heat-seeking missile. That's when he saw her. A small woman stood directly in his path, barely 5'4", with her back to him. She wore standard Army combat uniform in a universal camouflage pattern, but it looked rumpled, lived in. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun that had seen better days, with a few strands escaping around her face. She seemed to be studying the menu board, moving slowly, uncertainly. In his exhausted, tunnel-visioned state, Chen made instant assumptions. New recruit, probably, fresh out of basic training. Didn't know mess hall protocol yet. Standing around blocking traffic like she had all the time in the world. He couldn't see any rank insignia from his angle. Her collar was folded oddly, and her shoulder boards were somehow obscured. "Excuse me," Chen said, his voice carrying more edge than he intended. The woman didn't move. Maybe she didn't hear him over the noise of the mess hall. Chen's patience, already worn thin by the longest day of his life, snapped completely. "I said move it, Private." He reached out and pushed her shoulder, harder than necessary, trying to get past her to the line. The woman stumbled sideways, catching herself against a nearby table. Her hand shot out to grip the edge, preventing a complete fall. She turned her head slightly, and Chen caught a glimpse of her face, older than he'd assumed, maybe mid-40s, with sharp gray eyes that locked onto his for just a fraction of a second. But Chen was already past her, barreling toward the serving line. "Some people need to learn situational awareness," he muttered loudly to no one in particular, though several soldiers nearby definitely heard him. He didn't see the woman straighten up slowly, brushing off her uniform with careful, measured movements. He didn't notice her calm expression, completely unbothered by what had just happened. He didn't catch the way her eyes followed him with an unreadable assessment. What Chen did finally notice was the silence. It spread through the mess hall like a shockwave. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. The usual clatter of trays and silverware seemed to diminish. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving, frozen in place. Chen looked around, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. His buddy, Corporal James Davies, was standing near a table with his tray, his face completely drained of color. His mouth hung open slightly, and his eyes were wide with something that looked like horror. Next to him, Specialist Tucker had actually dropped his fork, which clattered onto his tray with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. What? Chen asked, genuinely confused by their reactions. Davies couldn't seem to form words. He just stared past Chen toward where the woman was now walking calmly to a corner table, completely alone. As she moved, Chen noticed something strange. Soldiers were practically scrambling to get out of her way. Not obviously, not in a panic, but with subtle, almost unconscious movements that created a clear path wherever she walked. A young lieutenant at a nearby table had gone pale. He stood up slowly, almost at attention, though the woman wasn't looking his direction. A Captain Chen recognized from battalion headquarters actually looked like he might be sick. "Marcus," Davies finally managed to whisper, his voice barely audible. "Please, please tell me you didn't just—" "Didn't just what?" Chen interrupted, his own voice sounding too loud in the hushed space. "What's everyone's problem?" Before Davies could answer, a presence materialized at Chen's shoulder. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the mess hall's senior NCO and a man Chen had always respected, stood there with an expression that was completely unreadable. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. "Sergeant Chen," Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carefully controlled, "I need you to finish getting your meal, eat it quickly, then report immediately to Lieutenant Colonel Briggs's office. He's waiting for you." The tone left absolutely no room for questions or discussion. This wasn't a suggestion. This wasn't a request. Chen's appetite vanished instantly, replaced by a cold knot of dread in his stomach. "Master Sergeant, what?" "Now, Sergeant." Rodriguez's voice dropped even lower, almost sympathetic. "And Marcus, you're going to want to prepare yourself for that conversation." Chen turned slowly, his eyes drawn back to the woman he'd pushed. She sat alone at her corner table, calmly eating her meal as if nothing had happened. But everyone else in the mess hall was giving her table a wide berth, like there was an invisible force field around her. She took a bite of her food, chewing thoughtfully, and for just a moment her gray eyes flicked up and met Chen's across the crowded room. She didn't look angry, she didn't look upset. She looked patient, like someone waiting for something inevitable to unfold. Chen's blood ran cold. What had he just done? Marcus Chen's hands trembled slightly as he moved through the serving line. The food that had seemed so appealing minutes ago now looked like sawdust on his plate. He mechanically accepted meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans from kitchen staff who wouldn't meet his eyes. Even the usually chatty Sergeant Williams, who ran the serving line, remained completely silent, his face carefully neutral. Chen carried his tray to the table where Davies sat, but his friend looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. As Chen sat down, Davies actually flinched, sliding his chair back slightly as if proximity to Chen might be contagious. "Talk to me," Chen said quietly, setting down his tray. His appetite was completely gone now, but he forced himself to pick up his fork. "What just happened?" Davies glanced around nervously, making sure no one was within earshot. The tables nearest to them had mysteriously emptied, soldiers finding excuses to sit elsewhere. "Marcus, man, you really didn't see her insignia." "There was no insignia visible," Chen insisted. "I looked. Her collar was folded weird and I couldn't see her shoulders clearly. I thought she was some new private who didn't know mess hall flow yet." "Oh God," Davies breathed, running his hand over his face. "Oh God, Marcus, that wasn't, she's not." Before Davies could finish, Specialist Angela Martinez appeared at their table. She was part of Chen's own platoon, a reliable soldier he'd known for 2 years. Her face was pale, and she looked at Chen with something resembling pity. "Sergeant Chen," she said softly, "people are saying— I heard from Corporal Jenkins who heard from the lieutenant's aide that the woman you pushed was—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Was what?" Chen demanded, his voice rising slightly. Several heads turned their direction. Martinez leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper. "They're saying she's a general, Sergeant, like a real general, stars and everything." The fork slipped from Chen's fingers and clattered against his plate. That's impossible. A general wouldn't be in here without anyone knowing. There'd be aides, security, some kind of protocol. Unless she didn't want anyone to know, interrupted a voice from behind him. Chen turned to find Lieutenant William Foster standing there, a young officer who'd graduated from West Point just 2 years ago. Foster was normally confident, almost cocky, but right now he looked shaken. "Sir," Chen stood up automatically, years of military protocol kicking in despite his confusion. Foster gestured for him to sit back down and pulled up a chair, his voice low. "I was over by the command building this afternoon. Saw a convoy arrive real low-key. No flags, no ceremony, nothing, just 2 black SUVs. My co got a call and practically sprinted out of the office." He paused, glancing toward where the woman sat eating calmly. About an hour later there was an email. "Command staff only. New base commander arriving for unannounced inspection. We were ordered to act normal, not to alert anyone." Chen's stomach dropped. Base commander, but General Patterson. "Retired last month," Foster confirmed. "Apparently, his replacement wanted to see the real Fort Bragg, not the dog and pony show we put on for VIP visits." The lieutenant's eyes were sympathetic. "Sergeant, I think you just put your hands on Major General Sarah Kovac." The name hit Chen like a physical blow. Everyone in the Army knew that name. General Kovac was a legend, a Mustang officer who'd enlisted as a private, worked her way up through the ranks, earned her commission through OCS, and climbed all the way to 2-star general. She'd been deployed to Iraq 3 times, Afghanistan twice. 2 silver stars, a bronze star with valor, a Purple Heart. She was famous for 2 things: tactical brilliance and absolute intolerance for disrespect. "No," Chen said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, that can't be right. Why would a general be walking around with no rank showing, no security detail, nothing?" "Because that's exactly what General Kovac does," said a new voice. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had returned, standing at the head of their table with his arms crossed. His expression was grave. "I served under her in Afghanistan back when she was a colonel. She's famous for this. Shows up unannounced, strips off her rank, walks around observing how soldiers really behave when they think no one important is watching." He looked directly at Chen. "She believes you can judge a unit's true character by how people treat those they think are beneath them." Chen felt sick. He pushed his tray away, unable to even look at the food. "I didn't know, Master Sergeant. I swear, I couldn't see any rank, I just thought." "You thought she was someone who didn't matter," Rodriguez finished bluntly. "Someone you could push around, literally." The words stung because they were true. Chen had been exhausted, hungry, and frustrated, and he'd taken it out on someone he'd perceived as lower ranking and therefore less important. The fact that she turned out to be a general made it worse, but Rodriguez was right. The real problem was his attitude. "What do I do?" Chen asked quietly. "You already have your orders," Rodriguez reminded him. "Finish eating and report to Colonel Briggs. Whatever happens next is way above my pay grade." He softened slightly, his voice losing some of its edge. "For what it's worth, Chen, you're a good NCO. I've seen you lead your soldiers well, but this is bad, real bad." As Rodriguez walked away, Chen forced himself to look across the mess hall at General Kovac. She was nearly finished with her meal, eating at a leisurely pace, occasionally glancing around the room with those sharp gray eyes. She seemed completely at ease, as if she hadn't just been physically shoved by a staff sergeant who was now contemplating the end of his career. A captain from the intelligence section walked past her table, and Chen saw him nod respectfully. The general nodded back but made no other acknowledgement. She was still maintaining her low profile, not drawing attention to herself. Davies finally found his voice again. "Marcus, my cousin served under General Kovac at Fort Hood. He told me stories. She once court-martialed a lieutenant colonel for mistreating enlisted soldiers, ended his career over it. But she also personally mentored a sergeant who'd screwed up badly, helped him turn his career around." He looked at his friend with worried eyes. "The question is, which version of her are you going to meet tomorrow morning?" Chen watched as the general stood up, collected her tray, and walked to the dish return. Soldiers parted before her like water around a stone. She disposed of her trash with the same calm efficiency she seemed to apply to everything, then walked toward the exit. Just before she reached the door, she paused and turned her head slightly, looking directly at Chen across the crowded mess hall. Their eyes met for the second time that evening. Her expression was impossible to read, not angry, not amused, just observant, assessing. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a quiet click that somehow seemed to echo through the still-hushed mess hall. Chen looked down at his untouched food and realized his hands were shaking. In his 12 years of military service, he'd faced enemy fire, survived IED blasts, jumped out of perfectly good airplanes, and led soldiers through some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But he'd never been more terrified than he was right now. "I need to go see Colonel Briggs," he said quietly, standing up. Davies grabbed his arm. "Marcus, good luck, man. Whatever happens, you're a good soldier, don't forget that." Chen nodded numbly and headed for the door, feeling the eyes of every soldier in the mess hall watching him go. The walk to the command building felt like a march to his own execution. His career, his family's future, everything he'd worked for over 12 years, it all hung in the balance now. And it all depended on what Major General Sarah Kovac had decided about the staff sergeant who'd pushed her in the mess hall. The walk to Lieutenant Colonel Briggs's office felt like the longest quarter-mile of Marcus Chen's life. The evening air had cooled considerably, and a light breeze rustled through the pine trees that lined the pathway between buildings. Under normal circumstances, Chen would have found it pleasant. Tonight, he barely noticed. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Court-martial, reduction in rank, dishonorable discharge. How would he explain this to his wife, Sarah? To his 2 kids who bragged about their dad being a staff sergeant? His daughter wanted to follow in his footsteps and join the army. What kind of example had he just set? The command building loomed ahead, its windows glowing with fluorescent light against the darkening sky. Chen had been here hundreds of times for routine meetings, briefings, and administrative tasks. It had never felt threatening before. Tonight, it felt like walking into a courthouse for sentencing. He climbed the steps, pulled open the heavy door, and signed in with the CQ runner at the desk. Private First Class Morrison, the same soldier Chen had helped with repelling earlier that day, sat behind the desk. The young man's eyes widened when he saw Chen. "Sergeant Chen," Morrison said carefully, "Colonel Briggs is expecting you. He said to send you right in." "Thanks, Morrison," Chen managed, his voice sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Sergeant," Morrison called out as Chen started down the hallway. Chen turned back. The private looked genuinely concerned. "Whatever this is about, sir, you've always been fair to us. Just wanted you to know that." Chen nodded, unable to trust his voice. He continued down the corridor, his boots echoing on the polished linoleum floor, past the awards and photos of Fort Bragg's history, past the framed pictures of the chain of command, from the president down through the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, and finally to the local command structure. Chen stopped abruptly in front of that last frame. There, in the bottom right corner where the base commander's photo should be, was an empty space with a small placard that read, "Position pending." General Patterson's photo had already been removed. By tomorrow, that space would hold a picture of Major General Sarah Kovac, the woman he'd shoved in the mess hall. He forced himself to keep walking. Colonel Briggs's office was at the end of the hall, door slightly ajar. Chen could see his commanding officer through the gap, sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen with an expression of deep stress. Chen knocked firmly on the doorframe. "Staff Sergeant Chen, reporting as ordered, sir." "Come in, Marcus. Close the door behind you." The use of his first name was not a good sign. Briggs was usually strictly professional during duty hours. Chen entered and shut the door with a quiet click that sounded like a cell door closing. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Briggs was 48 years old, a career infantry officer with 2 combat deployments and a reputation for being tough but fair. Chen had served under him for 3 years and had always respected the man. Right now, Briggs looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Sit down, Marcus," Briggs said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Chen sat at attention, back straight, hands on his knees, military bearing even in crisis. Briggs was silent for a long moment, studying Chen with an expression that mixed disappointment with something that might have been pity. Finally, he spoke. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Sir, I pushed someone in the mess hall. I was told it might have been a senior officer, but I couldn't see rank insignia." "Stop," Briggs interrupted, holding up his hand. "Just stop, let me show you something." He turned his computer monitor so Chen could see the screen. A personnel file was open, displaying a military ID photo. The woman from the mess hall stared back at him, but in this photo, she wore her dress uniform. On each shoulder board gleamed 2 silver stars, each one representing the weight of command over thousands of soldiers. Major General Sarah Elizabeth Kovac. Chen's worst fears were confirmed, but seeing it officially made it real in a way the mess hall rumors hadn't. His mouth went dry. 52 years old, Briggs continued, his voice flat as he read from the screen. Enlisted at age 18 as a private. Deployed to Iraq in 2003 with the initial invasion force. Earned her commission through Officer Candidate School in 2005. Deployed 2 more times to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. First Silver Star earned in Fallujah for leading a counterattack that saved her entire company. Second Silver Star, details still classified, somewhere in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Briggs scrolled down. Bronze Star with Valor for pulling 3 wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle while under enemy fire. Purple Heart from that same engagement took shrapnel to the shoulder but refused evacuation until her soldiers were safe. Combat Infantry Badge, Expert Marksmanship Badge, Airborne Qualified, Ranger Qualified. She went through Ranger School in her 40s, Marcus. Do you know how hard that is? Chen did know. Ranger School broke men half her age. She's commanded at every level from platoon to brigade, Briggs continued. She's been an instructor at the Command and General Staff College. She's advised 4-star generals on counterinsurgency tactics. She's testified before Congress on military readiness. And last month, she was selected to command this entire installation. 11,000 soldiers, Marcus. 11,000 soldiers now under the command of the woman you physically shoved in the mess hall. The weight of it crashed over Chen like a wave. This wasn't just any general. This was one of the Army's rising stars, someone who'd earned every single rank through merit and blood, someone who'd literally bled for the soldiers under her command. And he'd treated her like she was nothing. "Sir," Chen began, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't know. That's not an excuse, I know, but I genuinely couldn't see her rank. The way she was standing, her collar was folded, and I was exhausted from training, and You just assumed she was someone who didn't matter," Briggs finished, his tone sharp. "That's what your report to me will say, isn't it? That you were tired and hungry and saw someone you thought was lower ranking, so you decided basic courtesy didn't apply." Chen wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words died in his throat. Because that was exactly what had happened. He'd made an assumption based on perceived rank and acted accordingly. "The general arrived yesterday, a full day ahead of schedule," Briggs continued. "No announcement, no ceremony, no advance notice to anyone below brigade command level. She specifically ordered us not to alert the base to her presence. She wanted to conduct what she calls a climate assessment." "A climate assessment, sir?" She walks around in regular ACUs with her rank hidden, observing how soldiers interact when they don't know someone important is watching. She evaluates everything: how NCOs treat privates, how officers treat enlisted, how people behave in the mess hall, the motor pool, the barracks. She's looking for the real Fort Bragg, not the sanitized version we'd show her on an official inspection. Briggs leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. General Kovac has a philosophy, Marcus. She believes that the true character of a unit and of individual soldiers is revealed in how they treat people who can't do anything for them, people they perceive as powerless or unimportant. Chen felt sick. By that standard, he'd revealed exactly who he was, and it wasn't pretty. She's done this at every command she's taken, Briggs continued. At Fort Hood, she caught a major berating a specialist for a minor uniform infraction. That major is now a civilian. At Fort Campbell, she observed a senior NCO mentoring a struggling private with patience and respect. That NCO got a commendation and a choice assignment. The implications were clear. General Kovac was judge, jury, and executioner when it came to professional character, and Chen had just failed her test spectacularly. "What happens now, sir?" Chen asked quietly. Briggs turned the monitor back toward himself and closed the file. "General Kovac has requested that you report to her office tomorrow morning at 600 hours. Her temporary office is in Building 4, Room 203. She wants to speak with you personally." "Did she say about what, sir?" "She didn't have to, Marcus." Briggs's expression softened slightly, showing the concern of a commander who genuinely cared about his soldiers. "Look, I've known you for 3 years. You're a good NCO. You care about your troops. You lead from the front. You've never had a single disciplinary issue cross my desk. But this—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I honestly don't know what she's going to do. General Kovac has a reputation for being absolutely fair, but she's also known for having zero tolerance for disrespect or abuse of authority. I've read about her career. She's ended officers' careers for less than what you did, but she's also given second chances to soldiers who showed genuine remorse and potential for growth." "Which category do I fall into, sir?" "That's not for me to decide," Briggs said. "That's entirely up to the general. My advice: go in there tomorrow morning with absolute honesty. Don't make excuses. Don't try to minimize what you did. Own it completely. If there's one thing General Kovac respects, it's integrity." Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "And Marcus," Briggs's voice dropped lower, almost paternal, "prepare yourself for the possibility that your Army career might end tomorrow. I'm not saying it will, but you need to be ready for that outcome. Talk to your wife tonight. Get your affairs in order. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." The words hit like a physical blow, but Chen forced himself to nod. "I understand, sir." Dismissed, and Chen, "For what it's worth, I hope she sees in you what I've seen. You're better than what you showed today." Chen stood, saluted, and walked out of the office on legs that felt like rubber. The hallway seemed longer on the way out. The building felt like it was closing in around him. Outside, the night had fully fallen. Stars were visible above Fort Bragg, the same stars that had looked down on every soldier who'd ever worn the uniform. Chen had looked up at these stars from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from training fields across America. He might never see them as a soldier again. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his wife. "How was your day? Kids want to say goodnight." Chen stared at the message for a long moment, then started the long walk home, trying to figure out how to explain to his family that everything they'd built together might come crashing down tomorrow at 600 hours. The drive home from Fort Bragg to Chen's house in the nearby military housing community normally took 15 minutes. Tonight, Marcus sat in his truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes before he could even bring himself to start the engine. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Through the windshield, he could see other soldiers heading to their cars, finishing their duty day, laughing and talking. Normal Wednesday evening activity. Their biggest concerns were probably what to have for dinner or what to watch on TV. Chen would have given anything to trade places with any of them. Finally, he started the truck and pulled out onto the main road. The familiar route passed in a blur. The commissary where his family shopped every Saturday, the elementary school his daughter attended, the park where he'd taught his son to ride a bike. Everything felt different now, tinged with the possibility of loss. He pulled into the driveway of their modest three-bedroom house at 1847 hours. Sarah's car was already there, and he could see lights on in the kitchen. Through the window, he glimpsed his wife moving around, probably preparing dinner. Wednesday was usually spaghetti night. The kids loved it. Normal life. A life that might be completely upended by tomorrow morning. Chen sat in the truck for another 5 minutes trying to compose himself. He couldn't fall apart. Not in front of Sarah and the kids. He needed to be strong, even if he felt like his world was collapsing. The front door opened. Sarah stood there, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. Even from the driveway, he could see the concern on her face. 12 years of marriage had given her an uncanny ability to read his moods, even from a distance. He had no choice. Chen turned off the truck and walked to the house. "Marcus," Sarah said as he reached the door, "what's wrong? You look terrible. Can we talk after the kids go to bed?" His voice came out rougher than intended. Her eyes widened with worry, but she nodded. "Of course, dinner's almost ready. Emma and Jason are doing homework." Chen managed to make it through dinner on autopilot. 8-year-old Emma chattered about her science project on volcanoes. 6-year-old Jason demonstrated his new ability to count to 100 in Spanish. Normally, Chen would have been engaged, asking questions, encouraging them. Tonight, he smiled and nodded at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere. Sarah kept glancing at him with increasing concern. After dinner, Chen helped with dishes while Sarah supervised baths and bedtime routines. He read Jason a story about firefighters, his son's current obsession, but barely registered the words. He kissed Emma goodnight and listened to her excitement about becoming a soldier, just like Daddy someday, and the words felt like knives in his chest. What kind of example had he set for her today? Finally, mercifully, both children were asleep. Sarah closed Jason's bedroom door and turned to Marcus with her arms crossed. "Okay, what happened?" They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where they'd made plans and celebrated promotions and weathered the stress of deployments. Chen told her everything. The exhaustion from training, the mess hall, the push, the horrible realization of who the woman was, the meeting with Colonel Briggs, the appointment tomorrow morning that could end his career. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to something that looked like grief. When he finished, silence filled the kitchen like a physical presence. "Okay," she finally said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Okay, we'll deal with this. Sarah, I might lose everything tomorrow. The career, the pension, the health care for the kids. We'll deal with it," she repeated firmly, reaching across the table to grip his hands. "Marcus, we've survived 2 deployments, 3 moves, and that awful year when you were injured in Afghanistan. We'll survive this too. But this is different. This is my fault. I screwed up. I let my exhaustion and frustration turn me into someone I don't even recognize." "Then tomorrow, you show that general who you really are," Sarah said. "Not the exhausted staff sergeant who made a terrible mistake, but the man who's led soldiers with integrity for 12 years. The NCO who stayed up all night helping Specialist Brooks study for his promotion board. The leader who drove 3 hours to attend Private Martinez's father's funeral on your day off. That's who you are, Marcus." Chen felt tears burning in his eyes. What if she doesn't see that? What if all she sees is the guy who pushed her? "Then we start over," Sarah said simply. "You find another job, we figure it out. But I don't believe that's what's going to happen. If this General Kovac is as fair as everyone says, she'll give you a chance to show who you really are." After Sarah went to bed, Chen sat alone in the living room with his laptop, unable to sleep. He pulled up everything he could find about Major General Sarah Kovac, official army biography, news articles, military forums where soldiers who'd served under her shared stories. The picture that emerged was complex. She was tough, absolutely demanding of excellence and intolerant of disrespect or abuse. 3 officers and 2 senior NCOs had seen their careers end under her command for various offenses ranging from harassment to incompetence to mistreatment of subordinates. But there were other stories too. A sergeant who'd been caught stealing from the PX, normally a career-ending offense, whom she'd personally mentored for 6 months, helping him address the financial desperation that had driven him to theft. He was now a respected sergeant first class. A lieutenant who'd frozen during a combat situation, nearly getting his platoon killed, whom she'd counseled through his PTSD and helped return to effective service. The common thread in the second chance stories was genuine remorse and willingness to change. General Kovac seemed to have an ability to distinguish between soldiers who made mistakes but had good hearts and those who were fundamentally unsuited for service. Which category did Chen fall into? At 200 hours, he gave up on sleep and went to his home office. He pulled out a notepad and began writing. If tomorrow was the end of his career, he wanted to leave with dignity. He drafted a resignation letter, choosing each word carefully. He updated his resume for the first time in years, trying to translate military skills into civilian terms. But he also wrote something else, a letter to General Kovac that he might never send. In it, he poured out his genuine remorse, his recognition of what his action revealed about his character in that moment, and his commitment to being better. Writing it helped clarify his thoughts, even if he never showed it to anyone. At 3:45 hours, Sarah appeared in the doorway in her bathrobe. "Come to bed, Marcus, even if it's just for an hour." He followed her upstairs and lay in the darkness, listening to her breathing gradually slow into sleep. Chen stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as occasional cars passed on the street outside. His mind kept replaying the moment in the mess hall. If he could go back, change that one instant, everything would be different. But that was the thing about mistakes. You couldn't undo them. You could only try to learn from them and be better. At 4:45 hours, his alarm went off. Chen had maybe gotten 20 minutes of actual sleep. He showered, shaved with extra care, and put on his most immaculate uniform. Every detail was perfect. Boots shined to a mirror finish, brass gleaming, not a single thread out of place. If he was going to face judgment, he'd do it looking like a soldier. Sarah made him breakfast, but he could barely eat. She packed him a lunch anyway, the same routine they'd followed for 12 years. At the door, she hugged him tightly. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Come home to us." "Always," he promised, though the word felt hollow. The drive back to Fort Bragg felt surreal in the pre-dawn darkness. The base was just waking up, PT formations gathering, street lights still on, the day shift beginning. Chen parked and walked toward Building 4, where General Kovac had set up her temporary office. He was 30 minutes early, but he needed the time to compose himself. He sat on a bench outside the building, watching the sky gradually lighten from black to deep blue to the pale gray of approaching dawn. Other soldiers passed, heading to their duty stations. A few recognized him and nodded greetings. Did they know? Had word spread about what he'd done? Fort Bragg's rumor mill was incredibly efficient. At 5:50 hours, Chen entered the building. It was older, one of the original structures from when the base was first established. The hallways smelled like floor wax and old paint. His boots echoed on the tile floor as he climbed the stairs to the second floor. Room 203 was at the end of the hall. The door was closed, but light showed underneath. She was already there. Chen checked his watch. 5:55 hours. He could wait 5 more minutes, arrive exactly on time. But what was the point of pretending he had that kind of control over the situation? He approached the door and knocked firmly, 3 sharp raps. "Enter," came a voice from inside. Calm, controlled. The same voice that had probably given orders under fire in Fallujah and the mountains of Afghanistan. Chen opened the door and stepped into the room that would determine his future. Major General Sarah Kovac sat behind a simple desk in the sparse office. She wore her ACUs with rank clearly displayed this time, those two stars that represented command, responsibility, and the weight of thousands of soldiers' lives. Her gray eyes looked up from a folder on her desk and locked onto his. "Staff Sergeant Chen," she said evenly. "You're early, close the door and have a seat." Chen did as ordered, his heart pounding so hard he was certain she could hear it. The general closed the folder, his personnel file, he realized, and folded her hands on the desk. "Let's talk about yesterday," she said. And Marcus Chen's fate hung in the balance. The office was Spartan, just a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and an American flag in the corner. No personal photos, no awards on the walls, nothing to indicate this was the workspace of one of the Army's most decorated generals. Through the single window, Chen could see the sun just beginning to crest the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. General Kovac gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Sergeant Chen." Chen sat, maintaining perfect posture despite every instinct screaming at him to stand at attention. The general's face was unreadable, not angry, not sympathetic, just professionally neutral. Her gray eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel transparent, as if she could see every thought, every regret, every fear racing through his mind. "Before we discuss yesterday's incident," she began, "I want you to walk me through your entire day. Start from when you woke up. Every detail matters." This wasn't what Chen had expected. He'd prepared for accusations, for judgment, for immediate consequences, not for an interview about his daily routine. But he'd learned long ago that when a general gave an order, you followed it. "I woke at 4:30 hours, ma'am," Chen began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "My platoon had Hell Week training starting at 600. I got to the training area early to inspect equipment and review the day's schedule with my team leaders." "What was the training focus?" the general asked. "Live fire exercises combined with equipment troubleshooting under stress, ma'am. We were simulating combat conditions where soldiers have to maintain and repair weapon systems while under simulated enemy contact." General Kovac nodded slightly. "Continue." Chen described the day in detail. The equipment malfunctions that had delayed the timeline, the near miss when Specialist Rodriguez almost walked into a danger zone, the 2 safety violations he'd had to document. He explained how he'd skipped lunch to help Private Morrison with his rappelling technique, because the young soldier was terrified of heights but determined to overcome his fear. "Morrison made 3 successful descents by the end of the day," Chen added. "I stayed with him through each one." "That's good leadership," the general observed. "What happened after training concluded?" "I spent 90 minutes doing paperwork, ma'am. Incident reports for the safety violations, counseling statements, updating training records. Then I realized the mess hall was closing soon. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, 18 hours prior. I was exhausted, hungry, and frustrated about the setbacks we'd experienced during training." "And you took that frustration out on someone you perceived as beneath you," General Kovac said quietly. "Not a question, a statement." Chen met her eyes directly. "Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what I did." The general leaned back in her chair, her expression still neutral. "Tell me what you saw when you looked at me in that mess hall, Sergeant. Be completely honest." Chen took a breath. This was the moment for absolute truth, no matter how damning. "I saw someone small, ma'am. Someone whose uniform was wrinkled and whose collar was positioned in a way that blocked my view of any rank insignia. Someone standing in my path when I was in a hurry. And I made an assumption that you were a new private who didn't know proper mess hall protocol. And that assumption made it acceptable to physically push me." "No, ma'am." Chen's voice was firm. There's no acceptable reason for what I did. Even if you had been a private, I had no right to put my hands on you. I was wrong, and I knew it was wrong even as I was doing it. I just didn't care enough in that moment to stop myself. Something flickered in the general's eyes, surprise perhaps at his bluntness. Most soldiers in your position would make excuses, she observed. They'd blame exhaustion, stress, hunger. They'd minimize their actions. I could make those excuses, ma'am, and they'd all be true, but they don't change what I did or why I did it. I treated someone with disrespect because I thought they didn't matter. That's a failure of character, not a failure of circumstance. General Kovac was silent for a long moment, studying him with those penetrating gray eyes. Then she stood and walked to the window, her back to him, looking out at the base coming to life in the early morning light. I've been doing these unannounced observations for 15 years, Sergeant Chen, she said quietly. At every new command I've taken, do you know what I've learned? No, ma'am. I've learned that exhaustion and stress don't create character, they reveal it. She turned to face him. When soldiers are tired, hungry, and frustrated, their true nature emerges. The filters come off. Some soldiers become more patient, more compassionate because that's who they fundamentally are. Others become harsh, dismissive, even cruel because that's who they fundamentally are. Chen felt his chest tighten. This was it, the judgment. She was about to tell him that yesterday's incident revealed his true character, and that true character had no place in her army. But General Kovac surprised him. The question is, Sergeant Chen, which category do you actually fall into? She returned to her desk and sat down. Because I've been reading your personnel file this morning. I've seen stellar performance reviews, letters of commendation from 3 different commanding officers, a Bronze Star citation for leading your squad through an ambush in Afghanistan, testimony from your soldiers about your leadership and integrity. She tapped the folder on her desk. These documents tell me you're an exceptional NCO, but yesterday's incident tells a different story. So which one is the truth? Who are you really? Chen struggled to find words. Ma'am, I want to be the leader reflected in that file. I want to be the NCO my soldiers deserve. But yesterday I failed to be that person. I let my worst impulses control my actions instead of my training and values. That's a fair assessment, the general said. Now let me share something with you, Sergeant. Something I've never told anyone outside my immediate family. She folded her hands on the desk, her expression softening slightly for the first time since Chen had entered the room. 23 years ago, I was a brand new second lieutenant, fresh out of OCS and convinced I knew everything. I was at Fort Benning for additional training. One evening, rushing to a meeting, I snapped at a man in civilian clothes who was moving too slowly in front of me, told him to get out of my way, pushed past him rudely. The general's lips twitched in what might have been a bitter smile. Turned out he was the base's command sergeant major off duty, heading home after a 12-hour day. He'd served 30 years, earned a Silver Star in Vietnam, and there I was, a lieutenant with exactly 6 weeks of service, treating him like he was invisible. Chen's eyes widened. The parallel to his own situation was unmistakable. He could have destroyed my career before it started, General Kovac continued. Instead, he pulled me aside and taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned, that character isn't about how you treat the people who can advance your career. It's about how you treat the people who can't do anything for you at all. The private, the janitor, the cook, the person you think doesn't matter. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. He told me that everyone matters, Sergeant Chen. Every single person in this army has dignity, has value, deserves respect. Not because of their rank or their position, but because they're human beings serving something larger than themselves. That lesson changed everything for me, she said softly. It made me the officer I became, and eventually the general I am today. The question now is whether yesterday can be that kind of lesson for you. Chen felt something shift inside him. Not relief exactly, but a glimmer of possibility where before there had been only dread. "I want it to be, ma'am," he said quietly. "I want to learn from this, to be better." General Kovac nodded slowly. "We'll see, Sergeant, we'll see if you mean that." She opened a drawer and pulled out a document. "I'm going to give you a choice, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." Chen straightened in his chair, his heart pounding. "Option 1, the general said, is a formal letter of reprimand in your permanent file. It will follow you for the rest of your career, affecting every promotion board, every assignment selection. But you can continue serving, and if you work hard enough, you might eventually overcome it." She paused, letting that sink in. "Option 2 is something different, something I've designed specifically for you." General Kovac slid the document across the desk. Chen picked it up and began reading, his eyes widening with each paragraph. Chen's eyes scanned the document, his mind struggling to process what he was reading. It wasn't a reprimand. It wasn't a court-martial recommendation. It was something he'd never seen before, a detailed, structured program titled Leadership Restoration and Development Initiative. "Read it out loud, Sergeant," General Kovac instructed. "I want to hear if you understand what you'd be committing to." Chen cleared his throat and began reading. "For 30 consecutive days, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen will report to the Fort Bragg Reception Center at 500 hours, prior to his regular duty assignment. He will personally greet every incoming soldier, officer, and civilian employee arriving at Fort Bragg, regardless of rank or position." He paused, glancing up at the general. She gestured for him to continue. "During this period, Sergeant Chen will ensure that each new arrival experiences dignified, respectful treatment during their in-processing. He will mentor the reception center NCOs on principles of respectful leadership and military bearing. He will document instances of both exceptional and substandard treatment of new personnel and provide weekly reports to the base command." Chen's voice grew quieter as he continued. "Additionally, Sergeant Chen will develop a comprehensive training module on respect, dignity, and professional military bearing for implementation across all NCO professional development courses at Fort Bragg. This module will include practical scenarios, case studies, and assessment tools. The completed curriculum will be submitted for review within 45 days." The next paragraph made his stomach drop. "This assignment is in addition to, not in place of, Sergeant Chen's current duties and responsibilities. He will maintain his full platoon leadership role and training obligations. Failure to complete any aspect of this program will result in immediate administrative action, up to and including separation from service." Chen set the document down, his hands trembling slightly. The general was asking him to essentially work 2 full-time jobs for a month, surviving on maybe 4 hours of sleep per night. It would be brutal, exhausting, potentially impossible. But it was also an opportunity. "This isn't punishment, Sergeant Chen," General Kovac said, her voice firm but not unkind. "This is investment. I'm investing my time, my reputation, and the resources of this installation in the belief that you can become the leader I see potential for in your record." She stood and walked around the desk, leaning against it, her arms crossed. The posture was less formal, almost conversational, though her intensity never wavered. "I've ended careers for less than what you did yesterday," she continued. "I've recommended court-martial for NCOs who abused their authority, but I've also learned to recognize the difference between someone who is fundamentally unsuited for service and someone who made a terrible mistake but has the capacity to grow from it." "Which one do you think I am, ma'am?" Chen asked quietly. "I think you're at a crossroads," the general replied. "Yesterday, you revealed a character flaw, the tendency to devalue people you perceive as beneath you. That flaw exists in you, Sergeant. We both know it now. The question isn't whether it exists. The question is whether you're willing to do the hard work to change it." She picked up his personnel file and flipped through it. Private Morrison, the soldier you helped with repelling yesterday. I spoke with him this morning. Do you know what he told me? Chen shook his head, surprised. She'd already been interviewing his soldiers. He said you stayed with him for 3 hours past the end of training. He said you talked him through his fear, encouraged him, never once made him feel weak or inadequate. He said you made him believe he could overcome something he thought was impossible. General Kovac looked up from the file. That's the leader you're capable of being. She set the file down. But that same day, you pushed someone you thought was a private because they were in your way. That's also who you're capable of being. This assignment is designed to help you become the first version permanently and eliminate the second version entirely. Chen looked down at the document again. 30 days, 500 hours every morning, full platoon duties during the day, curriculum development at night. It would mean sacrificing sleep, family time, personal life. His wife would have to handle everything at home alone. His kids would barely see him. But the alternative was a permanent reprimand that would haunt his career forever, or worse, separation from the only profession he'd ever loved. The reception center assignment serves multiple purposes, General Kovac explained. First, it puts you in a position where you must treat every person with respect. You won't know if the private walking through that door is someone's child, someone's parent, someone who will save lives in combat someday. You'll learn to see the human being, not just the rank. She began packing slowly, her hands clasped behind her back. Second, you'll mentor other NCOs who work in reception. You'll teach them what you're learning. There's no better way to internalize a lesson than to teach it to others. Third, the curriculum you develop will become part of Fort Bragg's NCO education program. It will affect thousands of soldiers over time. Your mistake yesterday will ultimately improve this entire installation's culture, but only if you pour yourself into creating something genuinely valuable. Chen absorbed this, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about punishing or reforming him. It was about transforming his failure into something that could benefit the entire base. It was about redemption through service. The letter of reprimand is the easy path, General Kovac said, stopping her packing to face him directly. You take the hit to your record, serve out your career under a cloud, and eventually retire with benefits. No one could fault you for choosing that option. It's safe. It's predictable. She leaned forward slightly, her gray eyes locked on his. But the leadership development program, that's the hard path. It will push you to your absolute limits. You'll question whether you can do it. You'll be exhausted, frustrated, and tested every single day. Some nights you'll go home and wonder if it's worth it. But if you succeed, if you complete this program and create something meaningful, you won't just save your career, Sergeant Chen. You'll transform it. You'll become the kind of leader who changes soldiers' lives, the kind of NCO the Army desperately needs. The room fell silent. Through the window, Chen could see the base fully awake now, formations marching, vehicles moving, the daily rhythm of military life continuing as it had for decades. Thousands of soldiers going about their duties, most of them never knowing this conversation was happening. But what he decided in this moment would affect many of them. I need to ask you something, ma'am, Chen said carefully. Why are you offering me this chance? You could end my career with a single signature. Why invest this much effort in one staff sergeant who disrespected you? General Kovac returned to her chair and sat down, her expression thoughtful. Because that command sergeant major at Fort Benning invested in me when he could have destroyed my career. Because someone believed I was worth saving despite my arrogance and immaturity. And because he taught me that great leaders aren't born, they're forged through adversity and given opportunities to be better than their worst moments. She paused, then added quietly, and because when I read your file, when I talked to your soldiers, when I saw the genuine shame and remorse in your eyes just now, I saw someone worth investing in. I could be wrong. You could fail this program, prove that yesterday was who you really are, but I don't think I'm wrong. Chen felt emotion rising in his chest, gratitude, determination, and something like hope. I won't let you down, ma'am. Don't make me promises, Sergeant, the general said sharply. Make me results. Show me through your actions, not your words, that you're the leader you claim you want to be. She slid 2 documents across the desk, the letter of reprimand on the left, the leadership development program on the right. Choose now. I need your decision before you leave this office. Chen looked at both documents. His hand hovered over the reprimand for just a moment, the safe choice, the path of least resistance. Then he picked up the leadership development program and pulled a pen from his pocket. I choose to be better, ma'am, he said, signing his name at the bottom of the document. General Kovac took the signed paper and countersigned it. Report to the reception center at 500 tomorrow morning. Master Sergeant Williams runs that section. I've already briefed him on your assignment. He's expecting you. Yes, ma'am. And Sergeant Chen, the general's voice stopped him as he stood to leave. This program isn't designed to be easy. It's designed to change you fundamentally. Embrace the difficulty. That's where the growth happens. I understand, ma'am. I hope you do, General Kovac said. Because starting tomorrow, I'm not just your base commander, I'm your mentor, and I don't accept failure from the soldiers I invest in. Dismissed. Chen saluted sharply, executed a perfect about-face, and walked out of the office. His career hadn't ended. Instead, it had been given a second chance, one he was determined not to waste. The alarm screamed at 3:45 hours. Marcus Chen's hand shot out in the darkness, silencing it before it could wake Sarah. For the 28th consecutive morning, he rolled out of bed on 3 hours of sleep, his body protesting every movement. Every muscle ached. His eyes burned with fatigue. But he moved with practiced efficiency, a routine he'd perfected over 4 weeks of the most grueling experience of his military career. In the bathroom, he splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. The man looking back was leaner, harder, with dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep seemed to erase. But there was something else different too, something in his eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. Purpose, clarity, humility. By 4:30, he was dressed and driving through the pre-dawn darkness toward Fort Bragg. The base was still mostly asleep, just a few dedicated souls running their morning PT or pulling staff duty. Chen parked outside the reception center and sat in his truck for a moment, reviewing his notes for the day. 23 new arrivals expected today. Officers, enlisted, 2 civilian contractors. Each one would walk through those doors nervous, uncertain, hoping their new assignment would be a good one. And Chen would be there to make sure their first experience at Fort Bragg set the right tone. Master Sergeant Raymond Williams was already inside when Chen entered at 4:55. The 52-year-old NCO had been skeptical when General Kovac first explained Chen's assignment. Another staff sergeant who screwed up and needs rehabilitation, Williams had muttered. But over the past 4 weeks, that skepticism had transformed into genuine respect. Morning, Chen, Williams said, handing him a coffee. Big day. We've got a full bird colonel coming in from Germany, 3 lieutenants fresh from their basic courses, and a batch of privates from various training installations. I've got the roster, Chen confirmed, taking the coffee gratefully. Colonel Matthews arrives at 7:30. I'll handle his in-processing personally. Williams nodded approvingly. You know, when this program started, I thought the general was wasting her time. Figured you'd quit after a week. He paused, meeting Chen's eyes. I was wrong. You've changed this entire section. The way my NCOs interact with new arrivals, the attention to detail, the genuine respect, it's night and day compared to a month ago. Chen felt a flush of pride but kept his voice humble. I'm learning as much as I'm teaching, Master Sergeant, maybe more. The first arrivals began trickling in at 600. Private First Class Sarah Johnson from Indiana, fresh out of AIT, nervous and wide-eyed. Chen greeted her with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Welcome to Fort Bragg, Private Johnson. I'm Staff Sergeant Chen. We're glad you're here. Let me walk you through in processing and answer any questions you might have." Her shoulders relaxed visibly. "Thank you, Sergeant. I was worried about, well, everything." "That's completely normal," Chen assured her, guiding her to the first station. "Everyone feels that way at a new duty station, but you're going to do great here. Tell me about your MOS. What brought you to the Army?" As they talked, Chen felt the familiar sense of purpose that had become his anchor over these exhausting weeks. Each soldier he welcomed represented a life, a story, a family somewhere hoping their loved one would be treated well. He'd learned to see that in the first 5 minutes of meeting someone. The morning progressed with smooth efficiency. Chen moved between arrivals, ensuring each received respectful, dignified treatment. When he noticed Specialist Davis, one of Williams's reception NCOs, speaking curtly to a nervous private, Chen pulled him aside. "Specialist, let me show you something," Chen said quietly, not as a reprimand but as teaching. "That private is terrified right now. Left his family for the first time, doesn't know what to expect. Watch how different his body language is when you lead with empathy instead of efficiency." Chen demonstrated, approaching the private with a genuine smile and taking time to put him at ease before diving into paperwork. The transformation was immediate. The young soldier's rigid posture softened, his answers came more freely, and he actually smiled. Davis watched, understanding dawning on his face. "I never thought about it that way, Sergeant." "Neither did I," Chen admitted. "Until recently. But that's what makes the difference between a good soldier and a great leader, learning to see the person, not just the rank or the task to complete." At 7:30, Colonel James Matthews arrived, a career officer with 24 years of service and 3 combat deployments. Chen met him at the door with the same respect he'd shown the nervous private earlier. "Colonel Matthews, welcome to Fort Bragg, sir. I'm Staff Sergeant Chen from the Reception Coordination Team. It's an honor to have an officer of your caliber joining our installation." Matthews looked surprised, clearly not expecting such a formal welcome from an NCO. "Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate the greeting." As Chen walked the colonel through the streamlined officer in processing he'd personally redesigned, Matthews commented, "This is the smoothest PCS in processing I've experienced in 2 decades, Sergeant. Someone has clearly put thought into making this efficient and professional." "Thank you, sir. We believe that every soldier, regardless of rank, deserves to feel valued from the moment they arrive. First impressions matter." By 1200 hours, Chen had been awake for nearly 9 hours and had welcomed 21 people to Fort Bragg. Now he had exactly 45 minutes to grab lunch and get to his regular duty station, where his platoon was waiting for afternoon training exercises. The next 6 hours blurred together: land navigation training, equipment maintenance, counseling sessions with 2 soldiers who needed guidance, and paperwork that never seemed to end. By 1800 hours, when most soldiers were heading home, Chen was just beginning the 3rd phase of his day. He drove to the education center where he'd reserved a conference room. His laptop, 3 binders of research, and countless notes spread across the table. The training curriculum General Kovac had assigned was due in 3 days, and Chen was determined to make it exceptional. The module he'd developed was titled Dignity Through Leadership, Respect as the Foundation of Military Excellence. It wasn't just theory. It was filled with real scenarios, practical exercises, and honest case studies. Chen had even included his own story, with General Kovac's permission, as an example of how good leaders could make catastrophic mistakes and the importance of learning from them. At 21:45 hours, Sarah texted, "Kids are asleep. Come home when you can. Love you." Chen rubbed his burning eyes and looked at the curriculum spread before him. It was good, really good. But it wasn't finished yet. He had case studies to refine, assessment tools to finalize, and a presentation to prepare for the base command team. He worked until 23:30, then drove home through empty streets, his mind still processing ideas and revisions. Sarah was waiting up, even though she had to work early the next morning. "How was it?" she asked as he collapsed onto the couch beside her. "Exhausting, fulfilling, impossible and necessary at the same time." Chen leaned his head back, closing his eyes. 28 days down, 2 to go. "I'm proud of you," Sarah said softly. "The kids miss you, but they understand Daddy is doing something important. Emma told her class that you're teaching the whole army how to be better soldiers." Chen felt tears prick his eyes, exhaustion making him emotional. "I'm just trying to be worthy of the second chance I was given." "You already are," Sarah assured him. The final 2 days of the program were the hardest. Chen's body was running on fumes, sustained only by coffee, determination, and the knowledge that he was almost finished. On day 29, General Kovac made an unannounced visit to the reception center. Chen was in the middle of greeting a group of new arrivals when he noticed her standing quietly in the corner, observing. His heart rate spiked, but he didn't break stride. He welcomed each soldier with genuine warmth, ensured they had everything they needed, and took time to answer questions. When the last arrival had been processed, the general approached. "Walk with me, Sergeant Chen." They stepped outside into the crisp morning air. General Kovac was silent for a moment, her hands clasped behind her back as they walked. "Master Sergeant Williams tells me you've revolutionized his section," she finally said. "He says soldier satisfaction scores are up 40%. Processing efficiency has improved without sacrificing personal attention. His NCOs are modeling your approach with new arrivals." "I've had excellent support, ma'am," Chen replied. "Master Sergeant Williams gave me the freedom to implement changes and backed me with his team." "Don't deflect credit when it's earned, Sergeant," the general said firmly. "You did this. The question is, has it changed you?" Chen thought carefully before answering. "Yes, ma'am, it has. I see people differently now. Not as ranks or positions, but as individuals who deserve respect simply because they're human beings serving something larger than themselves. I can't unsee that, and I don't want to." General Kovac nodded slowly. "Your curriculum review is tomorrow at 1400 hours. The base command team will evaluate whether it's suitable for implementation across all NCO development programs. Are you ready?" "Yes, ma'am. I believe in what I've created." "Good, because if they approve it, you'll be teaching the first iteration yourself, to every senior NCO on this base." Chen's exhaustion momentarily forgotten, he straightened. "Ma'am, you broke something in that mess hall, Sergeant Chen, but in fixing yourself, you've built something valuable for this entire installation. Now you get to share it." Dismissed. As the general walked away, Chen realized the program wasn't ending in 2 days. It was evolving into something bigger, his life's work, perhaps. The mistake that almost destroyed him was becoming his legacy. 3 months had passed since Marcus Chen walked into General Kovac's office expecting the end of his career. Now he stood in the same Fort Bragg auditorium where he'd once sat through countless mandatory briefings. But this time he was at the podium, facing 200 senior NCOs from across the installation. His hands were steady as he adjusted the microphone. The exhaustion from those brutal 30 days had faded, replaced by something stronger, confidence born from genuine transformation. Behind him, a presentation slide displayed the title, "Dignity Through Leadership, Respect as the Foundation of Military Excellence." In the front row sat General Kovac, her expression neutral but attentive. Beside her were Colonel Briggs and Command Sergeant Major Patricia Reynolds, the base's senior enlisted leader. In the third row, Chen spotted Master Sergeant Williams, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Good afternoon," Chen began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. My name is Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, and 3 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my military career. The room went completely silent. This wasn't how professional development courses typically started. I physically pushed someone in the mess hall because I was tired, hungry, and frustrated. I didn't know who she was. I didn't care who she was. I saw someone I assumed was beneath me, and I treated her accordingly. Chen paused, letting the words sink in. That person was Major General Sarah Kovac, our base commander. A ripple of reaction moved through the audience, shifted postures, exchanged glances, raised eyebrows. Everyone had heard rumors, but hearing Chen admit it directly was something else entirely. "I'm not standing here to make excuses," Chen continued. "I'm here because General Kovac gave me a choice. She could have ended my career with a single signature. Instead, she invested in me. She created a program designed to fundamentally change how I see leadership, respect, and human dignity. And over the next hour, I'm going to share what I learned because these lessons aren't just mine anymore. They belong to all of us." For the next 50 minutes, Chen took them through the curriculum he developed. Real scenarios, difficult conversations, practical tools for recognizing and correcting disrespectful behavior. He shared research on unit cohesion and the measurable impact of dignified leadership. He presented data from the reception center showing how small changes in approach had dramatically improved soldier satisfaction and retention. But most powerfully, he shared stories. The private who'd been ready to quit the Army after being belittled by an NCO at his previous duty station, who'd found renewed purpose after being welcomed respectfully at Fort Bragg. The specialist who'd watched Chen mentor a struggling soldier and had asked to learn those techniques himself. The lieutenant who'd completely changed his leadership style after observing the reception center's approach to treating every person with dignity. "Here's what I learned," Chen said, approaching the conclusion of his presentation. "Respect isn't about rank. It's not something we give to people because they've earned it or because they outrank us. Respect is the baseline, the foundation of every interaction we have as leaders." He clicked to a slide showing a simple equation. Dignity plus respect equals trust. Trust equals mission success. When soldiers know they'll be treated with dignity regardless of their rank, regardless of whether they can do anything for us, they trust us. And soldiers who trust their leaders will follow them anywhere. Into combat, through hardship, through the impossible situations we ask them to face. Chen's voice grew quieter, more personal. But when we treat people as disposable, as obstacles, as less important because of their position, we break that trust. We damage our units. We fail as leaders. He looked directly at General Kovac. "I failed that test, spectacularly, but I was given a chance to learn from that failure, to grow beyond it, and to help ensure other NCOs don't make the same mistake." The presentation ended with a final slide showing a single sentence: "Everyone matters. Act accordingly." The applause started slowly, then built. Chen stepped away from the podium, his heart pounding. He'd done it. 30 days of brutal work, countless sleepless nights, and 3 months of refinement had led to this moment. As the NCOs filed out for their break, General Kovac approached. "Well done, Sergeant First Class Chen." Chen's eyes widened. "Ma'am." She held out a folder containing promotion orders. "Your promotion board convened last week. You were selected below the zone, ahead of your peers. Your leadership program was cited specifically as evidence of exceptional performance and potential." Chen opened the folder with shaking hands. Sergeant First Class. The rank he'd thought he'd never achieve after that day in the mess hall. The rank that now represented not just his recovery, but his transformation. "Additionally," General Kovac continued, "the division commander has requested your curriculum be implemented across all of Fort Bragg's sister installations. You'll be TDY for the next 6 months, traveling to train senior NCOs at 8 different bases." "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll continue the work," the general replied. Say you'll take this experience and use it to improve our army. That's how you truly repay the second chance you were given." "I will, ma'am, I promise." General Kovac's expression softened slightly. "I know you will. Do you understand now why I invested in you instead of ending your career?" Chen thought back to that terrible moment in the mess hall, to the sleepless night before their meeting, to the grueling 30 days that had followed. "Because you saw potential I didn't know I had." "No," the general corrected gently. "Because I saw the leader you already were, underneath one terrible mistake. I just gave you the opportunity to see it too." She extended her hand. "Congratulations, Sergeant First Class Chen, make me proud." "I already am trying to, ma'am, every single day." As General Kovac walked away, Chen looked down at the promotion orders in his hands. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah with a photo of Emma and Jason holding a homemade banner. "Congratulations, Daddy." They'd known before he did. The army had already notified his family. Chen walked outside into the bright afternoon sunshine. Across the parade field, he could see the mess hall where everything had changed. The place where his career had nearly ended, where his character had been tested and found wanting. But also the place where his real leadership journey had begun. That evening, Chen returned to the reception center one final time. His formal assignment there had ended, but he'd made it a habit to stop by occasionally. Master Sergeant Williams was processing a group of new arrivals, 3 privates who looked terrified and lost. Chen watched as Williams greeted each one with genuine warmth, taking time to put them at ease, treating them with the dignity and respect that had become the center's hallmark. One of Williams's NCOs, Specialist Davis, the same one Chen had mentored months ago, was demonstrating the same approach with another nervous soldier. The transformation had rippled outward, creating a culture change that would outlast Chen's direct involvement. "Sergeant First Class Chen," Williams called out, spotting him. "Come meet our newest arrivals." Chen approached the group with a smile. "Welcome to Fort Bragg. You've arrived at a special place. We believe that every soldier matters here, regardless of rank. You're going to do great things." The privates relaxed visibly, their anxiety giving way to cautious optimism. Chen saw in their faces what he'd learned to recognize over these past months: human beings hopping to be valued, to belong, to serve with purpose. Everyone matters, act accordingly. 5 simple words that had become his guiding principle, his leadership philosophy, his redemption. That night, Chen sat at his kitchen table with Sarah, reviewing the travel orders for his upcoming training assignments. 8 bases, thousands of NCOs, a chance to spread the lessons he'd learned through painful experience. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, squeezing his hand. Chen thought about the journey, from that terrible moment in the mess hall to this opportunity to impact the entire Army's culture. From nearly losing everything to gaining something far more valuable than his career, a true understanding of what leadership meant. "I am," he said. "This is what that moment in the mess hall was meant to teach me. Not just a lesson for myself, but something I could share with others. My failure became my purpose." 3 years later, dignity through leadership had been implemented at 47 Army installations worldwide. Chen, now promoted to Master Sergeant, had trained over 15,000 NCOs. The program had been credited with measurable improvements in unit cohesion, soldier retention, and leadership effectiveness. But the moment Chen treasured most came during a visit back to Fort Bragg. Walking through that same mess hall, he noticed a plaque on the wall he'd never seen before. "Everyone matters, act accordingly. Leadership Excellence Initiative, Fort Bragg." General Kovac, now a 3-star commanding an entire division, stood beside him. "Your legacy, Sergeant Chen, built from your worst moment." Chen smiled, watching soldiers of all ranks moving through the mess hall, treating each other with visible respect and dignity. "No, ma'am. Our legacy. You built this by believing in a staff sergeant who didn't deserve a second chance but desperately needed one. You earned it, she said simply, every day since. The mess hall that had nearly witnessed the end of Marcus Chen's career had instead become the birthplace of a movement that changed how thousands of leaders approached their responsibilities. The push that could have destroyed him had instead built him into exactly the leader the army needed. And every soldier who passed through Fort Bragg's gates, greeted with dignity and respect, became part of a legacy born from failure, forged through accountability, and transformed into excellence.
Cambio la
The end.
categoria. Abbiamo la fine di Portal, eh. Gli ultimi 2 capitoli di Portal dobbiamo fare. Ci metteremo un paio d'ore, secondo me. Avevo già iniziato il penultimo, quindi non ci dovremmo mettere tanto. Dai che voglio andare a giocare a Dark Riders.